If you grew up translating adult conversations before you fully understood the words, if you learned how to read a room before you learned how to relax in it, this might feel familiar. Of course, no two families are identical. Not every child of immigrant parent had the same experience. But when psychologists look at large-scale patterns, certain themes appear again and again among people raised between cultures. And those patterns don't come from personality alone. They come from the environment. Globally, more than 281 million people today live outside the country they were born in, according to the United Nations. In the United States alone, nearly 1 in 4 children has at least one immigrant parent. That's tens of millions of kids growing up inside 2 cultural conversations at once. When your parents leave one country to build a life in another, home is rarely just a physical place. It's a memory. It's comparison. It's loss and ambition, sitting at the same dinner table. You grow up hearing phrases like, "Back home we used to," or "where we come from." And even if you were born in the new country, you inherit a sense of elsewhere. That does something to a developing mind. Developmental psychologists describe identity formation as a process of integration, figuring out who you are by blending influences around you. But when you grow up between cultures, integration becomes more complex. You're not just balancing personality traits, you're balancing value systems. At school, you absorb the norms of your peers. At home, you shift your tone, your language, sometimes even your posture. This isn't manipulation, it's an adaptation. Researchers sometimes refer to this as bicultural competence, the ability to navigate 2 cultural frameworks fluently. Studies have shown that children raised in bicultural households often develop stronger perspective-taking skills and social flexibility. Not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because they've practiced cultural translation from an early age. And often, that translation is literal. Many children of immigrant parents serve as interpreters for bills, government documents, parent-teacher conferences. A study from the Journal of Child Language found that children who regularly interpret for parents tend to develop heightened sensitivity to tone and nuance. You learn to listen closely. You learn to anticipate misunderstandings before they happen. You learn that context matters. This creates what psychologists call adaptive hyper-awareness. You become good at reading subtle cues, not out of anxiety necessarily, but because the environment requires it. And then there's effort. Immigrant households, statistically, face higher rates of economic instability during the first generation. The OECD reports that first-generation immigrants in many countries earn less initially and often work longer hours while navigating credential recognition barriers. As a child, you may not fully understand the paperwork or policy, but you see the exhaustion, the recalibration, the restarting. You watch your parents rebuild identity in real time. That environment often creates what researchers call intergenerational upward mobility pressure. In simple terms, you understand early that your parents moved for opportunity, and you don't want to waste it. This doesn't always show up as visible pressure. Sometimes it shows up as seriousness, as careful decision-making, as long-term thinking. You may become intentional with money, with education, with reputation. You understand that your family name carries effort behind it. In work settings later in life, this often translates into reliability. A longitudinal study published in the Journal of Ethnic and Migration Studies found that second-generation immigrants frequently display higher academic persistence and occupational mobility than both first-generation immigrants and native-born peers. Not because they're inherently more ambitious, but because they grew up with a visible model of sacrifice. And here's where the strength forms. When you grow up watching people start over, you internalize something powerful. Starting over is survivable. That becomes resilience. Resilience doesn't mean you don't feel fear. It means you've seen evidence that disruption doesn't end the story. Your family already crossed borders. They already navigated systems that weren't designed for them. That memory sits quietly inside you. But every adaptation has a cost. Children of immigrant parents often describe an internal tug-of-war between autonomy and loyalty. Family systems researchers call this cultural value dissonance, the tension between collectivist values at home and individualist values in broader society. You may crave independence while feeling deeply anchored to family expectations. You may hesitate before making decisions that feel self-expressive but socially risky within your cultural circle. You may hesitate before making decisions that feel self-expressive but socially risky within your cultural circle. That tension can create depth, but it can also create quiet guilt. You might downplay achievements because they feel like continuations of your parents' sacrifices, not individual victories. You might feel that failure carries more than personal consequences, that it reflects on the family narrative. And yet over time, many people raised this way develop something rare: integration. Psychologists studying bicultural identity integration have found that individuals who successfully blend both cultural identities often report higher creativity, stronger problem-solving ability, and greater cognitive flexibility. Living between systems trains the brain to tolerate complexity. You understand that norms are constructed, that normal depends on geography, that perspective shifts with context, that awareness becomes a quiet advantage. You also often develop emotional translation skills. You explain your parents' strictness to your friends. You explain your friends' independence to your parents. You soften edges on both sides. That skill frequently shows up later as mediation ability. Conflict resolution, the capacity to see both sides without collapsing into either. It's perspective-taking, practiced over years. At the same time, many children of immigrant parents become highly self-sufficient. When your parents are navigating a new country, there are moments when you figure things out independently. Filling out forms, researching systems, navigating institutions. This builds competence. But sometimes it also builds reluctance to ask for help. Research in cross-cultural psychology suggests that second-generation immigrants may be less likely to seek external support during stress, especially if they perceive their family already carrying heavy burdens. You become capable, resourceful, quietly independent, and yet deeply rooted. Traditions carry weight: food, language, holidays. Even if you modify them, you understand their emotional gravity. Cultural rituals become anchors in motion. This layered identity can sometimes create a sense of in-betweenness. Too different in one space, not different enough in another. Sociologists refer to this as liminal identity, existing between categories. But liminality is not a weakness, it's range. You can sit in unfamiliar rooms without panic. You understand that there are many ways to structure a life. You're less shocked by the difference because you've lived it. And maybe the rarest trait of all is perspective. When you grow up hearing about political instability, economic hardship, or social upheaval in another country. Even while living in relative comfort, you develop a broader lens. You understand that security is not automatic, that opportunity is conditional, that stability requires maintenance, that awareness often leads to long-term thinking. To be careful, to be ambitious, shaped by practicality. And again, this won't describe everyone. Patterns are not prescriptions, but when many people share similar environmental conditions, similar adaptations emerge. The seriousness, the adaptability, the loyalty, the resilience. These are not random personality traits. They are responses to growing up in kitchens where two languages were spoken, in living rooms where sacrifice was normalized, in hallways where you practiced blending in while holding on. If this feels familiar, maybe you've spent years assuming this was simply who you are. But sometimes what feels like personality is adaptation. And when you recognize that, something shifts. The responsibility feels contextual. The flexibility feels earned. The depth makes sense. Children of immigrant parents often carry quiet strength, not because they sought it, but because their environment required it. And if you recognize yourself in this, you're not alone. There are millions who grew up between worlds, shaped not by confusion, but by complexity. If this resonated, let me know what felt familiar. And if you appreciate calm, thoughtful analysis of how the environment shapes identity, subscribe. Because sometimes understanding the pattern behind your story is the first step toward carrying it more lightly.